Yeah, a little bit. Your shirt. Yeah, I guess it works.
Show me the patch. The patches tweed. Yeah, the elbow
Oh,
patch.
You're not a professor.
but it is Harris Tweed.
Garbage.
So
maybe he's just like a new professor. And
this is an example of like impulse buying, where it's like, do you want this $400 jacket that's from Scotland? No. Or do you need it? No. Do I want it?
You'd be surprised.
Let's start with utility. I don't understand what it even means.
Everybody has some kind of utils in their head that they're calibrating.
There's hardly anything that hasn't been used for money.
In fact, there may be a fundamental problem in modeling what I want to model.
Economist Cast, episode 36. Eric is back from being down with the sickness. You missed an exciting cast. I was trying to channel my best Eric impression. I don't think I did very well.
Yeah, no, you asked my question. I appreciated that, the Game of Thrones stuff.
I thought it was really interesting. Matt was a great guest to have. I think we tried to push him the best we could. I want to be more combative.
There's two breeds of economists. What's the word I'm looking? The combative types who like don't really want to get into a super. I don't know. I was in grad school, so there's almost this everybody can vitality.
We have two mod topics today, one of which is one that we are been all over. I think, Eric, you've been all over it forever, is that Pokémon TCG Pocket is introduced trade.
That's right. It's in the name. TCG, trading card game, right? So they're like, oh, we got to do trading, but like no other digital card game does trading that much, or most of them don't. Anyway, we'll get into it. It was a big fiasco.
I was trying to find a clip, but we talked about this a couple episodes ago when we all thought about, we were all considering an economy with trade and one without, with the dusting economy. And we all universally said dusting almost without hesitation. And yet here they are. Topic number 2, Ball. We may know him as Mr. Metaverse himself, has done his monster deck for the year, the state of video gaming in 2025, 200 plus slides, and we have curated the best to the best. Now hits volume 1, Mathew Ball 2025. There's so much to talk about. But before we do, what have we been playing?
Got a selection of good things on sale, stranger.
I am going to be playing Monster Hunter Wilds, the beta. They have an open beta, the 6th to the 9th, and then another one, I think, where they're released on the 28th. So
title or the new expansion pack?
New title. This is a completely new title. I would say it's like Monster Hunter Worlds 2, where Worlds was like their first foray into kind of a more open world environment, seamless connections between map areas, and high fidelity graphics for the high powered consoles. That's why I'm wearing a suit. It's a special occasion. It's a holiday for me.
Take the day
so
work,
new Monster Hunter game.
I didn't know you were a Monster Hunter stan.
Yeah, he's Mr. Dark Souls and Monster Hunter.
Really?
I thought that was his whole.
Dude, I feel like I talk about Monster Hunter and Dark Souls pretty much that's 90% of the games I play.
For Monster Hunter?
Yeah, usually. I didn't play the Iceborne DLC for Monster Hunter World as much, but I've been grinding away. I've probably put about 55 hours in the last couple months into the Monster Hunter DLC Sunbreak, which is a shit DLC, but that's besides the point.
I've always wanted to get into Monster Hunter, but none of my friends play. I might hop on Wilds with you when it comes out.
You're more than welcome to. I have to admit, I'm a bit of a lone wolf when it comes to Monster Hunter. It doesn't have the same oomph when you have help to defeat a monster. When you bring a monster down to its knees yourself, just a man and his lance, oh my gosh.
The way God intended.
Nothing more satisfying. So I will be playing Monster Hunter Wild.
What's your favorite weapon?
It's funny, growing up, I always played longsword, but then in recent versions of the game, they've really improved the lance mechanics, and I just love it. You're just indestructible. You can't really be killed, especially if you got a good build. The game becomes hard when monsters can do chip damage, because all of a sudden you can't just block everything. Yeah, lance for sure. I think I've got over 1,000 hunts in the current Rise on lance.
Wallen, can you talk a little bit more about the stat system? So you're saying they introduced something that overrides the block stat called chip?
So I think that Monster Hunter, or I know Capcom publishes, I can't remember the studio's name. It's like Doubletree or something like that. They've done a really good job at juicing the old weapons and the old mechanics to make them more and more interesting. I think Rise is an example of where they took it too far. They introduced this mechanic called a wire bug, and it allows you to jump around the map. It's like, you can think of it as like a grappling hook, basically. And it really changed the way that some of the weapons worked. In my opinion, not for the best. Like, I never use it. But anyway, one of the big advantages of using the lance is that you don't take damage when you're blocking. Now, yeah, so you've got a shield and you've got a lance. And there are certain monsters that have really powerful attacks that will put damage through your shield. So you'll take what's called chip damage. And they have chip damage in Dark Souls as well. So certain shields, if they don't have 100% physical block, then you will take damage through them. And that's an interesting, I think they've always had chip damage, but as physics has gotten better, they've also been able to add in more physics-based blocking. Like how much does your character get pushed back? Because that's going to determine how quickly you can attack. There's a lot of really cool stuff that the hyper-realism does add something in terms of the gameplay. I love the arcadiness of Monster Hunter games. Click, block, attack, block, attack. There's patterns. You're just trying to hit combos. A lot like a fighting game, but it's more three-dimensional, which I like.
I have been playing a lot of Marvel Rivals, the infamous Overwatch competitor.
I don't think they're even competitors at this point. I think Rivals won.
Does it have to be zero sum? I looked at the Steam numbers on Deconstructor Fun, that other podcast, and it did look like that Overwatch took a dive. But Eric, you disagreed with that. You thought that there actually were more people, if I remember correctly, that are still in the Blizzard launcher that are more hardcore fans.
So I remember looking at TF2 and Overwatch when Overwatch launched. Again, two very similar games, class-based hero shooter, colorful. And the cannibalization of T to Overwatch was actually very small. And so my interpretation of the results was that they actually reached different audiences despite being very similar genres and very similar gameplay-wise. Possibly because Blizzard is their own bubble and then Steam was its own bubble. And so my theory is that Marvel Rivals kind of got this weird moat around Battle.net. And my theory is that Marvel Rivals probably didn't cannibalize Overwatch that much because Blizzard has their Battle.net moat. And also, Overwatch is pretty old. They've been churning players for a while. It's not like those players were... The players who are still on Overwatch are kind of committed to Overwatch.
I also heard the Steam launch didn't do much for them either. That it was basically net neutral. That maybe it diverted traffic and people re-downloaded. So I think there might be something to the theory that there's non-parallel trends too. Like we could say that Steam numbers are down, but the Blizz.net metrics are rather stable. And that would be an overall lower impact on the player base than if we just looked at the Steam numbers alone. But it does look like there's something. There clearly is some sort of trade-off or opportunity cost here, which is interesting because Marvel Rivals goes 3D, and it's very clear to me why they go 3D playing in the, or excuse me, they go third person, because it's so melee heavy, the game. It's so much less focused on you refining the aiming mechanics, and there's a ton of you spamming melee attacks over and over again. It's not like they try to have you conserve ammo. There's an unlimited amount of ammo. You do need to reload like a clip. The ammo is still unlimited, so there's very little reason to ration. When there's little reason to ration, you tend to spam the attacks quite a bit. And because they're melee attacks, the readability and the mishmash can get really complicated really quickly because the abilities are so diverse as well, which is something that I think MOBAs have struggled with quite a bit, is just readability, especially for a third-person audience. Like even Overwatch. If you try to bring in someone who hasn't played Overwatch before and have them watch the Overwatch League, it is confusing as fuck. There really isn't a center of combat. There's combat happening everywhere. There's fantastical abilities. There's ultimates going off. So I've actually struggled with Marvel Rivals to fight the fact that I love Marvel. I love Marvel to pieces. And the thing that's also been surprising to me is they also have very little content. I've been surprised that no one has taken the original Overwatch and Apex Legends monetization template of having a very simple loot box style system where you open up loot boxes and you get crafting currency along the way, which essentially serves as a shortcut to what your ranked preferences are. We could say for every 40 boxes, you get enough crafting currency to craft any epic you want, which ended up being, I would argue, a really good trade-off for like HD audiences that hate monetization. I'm just really surprised they haven't moved forward with a system like that. And they're doing all bundling of skins, direct purchase only, and they're not selling characters, which is mind-blowing to me. So I've been disappointed. There's no vertical progression. There's no horizontal progression. They don't sell any of the characters. And
Wait,
the
so
progression
how do they
that you have is
monetize?
limited.
Is it loot boxes or is it a la carte skins? All the characters are free, right?
Exactly. It's just the bundles of cosmetics that are available for direct purchase. And
Basically
Fortnite's model, but they don't have the content pace that Fortnite has or the level of selection. That's one of the things the Fortnite store has done, is that they've added spend depth by just adding inventory. Like they've gone from having 11 items in Fortnite's direct score to I think it's 40 now. And not only that, they have things from the vault. Those supposed time-limited things are back. Like they built a library.
This is a relatively new game, right? Don't they have time to build up a library? And to Eric, your point, like you think Rivals has won. I'm like an outsider on this. I have not yet dived into Rivals, but how do we know that they've defeated Overwatch?
People are
And what do you
playing
mean by
Rivals.
that?
I don't know. That's the hot game.
Now the
wasn't even a
CCU
fight.
is on.
It's a hot game.
No,
Overwatch is
you
fucking
look at the
8 years
CCU on
old.
Steam, and we don't have the charts in front of us, but we're talking about 500,000 CCU, which is just on Steam alone. So you like add console to that, and it's been doing not. I thought it would do better on console. Console data is hard to get out. All we have is Circana, which is just US based, and it's usually 9 or 10th. And the PSU charts for consoles or the MAU charts, which I thought would be better because I thought the controller would be a better control scheme. But this is huge, Chris. This is like a huge game. And the early reports, I think, were 150 million in the first month.
Okay, so better performance than Overwatch's launch, and that's why people are
not. I would argue maybe Overwatch 2, but not Overwatch 1.
So then what's the concern? It's like a new game, of course. All those charts look like this.
It's
Every
not
single new
declining,
game chart looks like this.
It's not declining. That's the thing that has blown people's minds is that they released one, which is the Mr. Fantastic season, or excuse me, Fantastic Four season, and PSU spiked again.
Okay.
That
would be
story,
interesting.
right? Because I was arguing that if this game went south, you have Supervive, which is the MOBA game, kind of bombed. You've got Spectre Divide, which bombed. Do you remember those one go after CS:GO? There's a Concord sound for account.
Here's a question: is this the only live service success story in the last year?
Yes. No, I think
When's the last one?
it depends on what you call live service success story. PUBG converted to free to play. I don't know. Does that count? I would say Warframe has been growing. Does that count?
Let's talk about new games. New game.
It's got to be
Delta Force
launch.
is probably the
launches.
second one that just came out around this period from the Chinese. That one's been largely stable, although I don't believe.
Do we count? Isn't there a new Call of Duty
It's
game
hard
that
to
came
track
out?
those metrics
Yeah,
because
that's not a new game. That's not. I don't consider.
It's under one SKU in
Fair.
Steam, so you can't also dice out the free to play version, which is super annoying. I think I would say maybe Throne and Liberty has been doing pretty well. This is the Korean MMO that Amazon Games localized. It's number 45 on the PSU charts. I would say, and the other one that I think is only the real long-term hit, or though it's really down, is Naraka Blade Point in China.
That's old though, right? That's been a while.
It was 2021.
Is the IP the reason that Rivals is such a success? I would guess not, because that wouldn't explain the sustained users. I feel like IP is enough to get people in the door, but it's not necessarily enough to keep them around. So I'm curious what we attribute the retention
They're
to.
shipping a character every month and a half, they said, which is an unbelievable breakneck. It's interesting, when you read about DeepSeek, the model from China that I think scared the living daylights out of many American pundits based on how fast the Chinese were catching up to AI progress. But when you look at the same axis along games, I actually think the story is more compelling about how fast China is getting good at this, because Marvel Rivals feels like a Western game. There's still a little bit of veneer, but
even those live service success stories you listed, right? Rivals, Delta Force, Blade Point, those are all China.
Yes.
None of these are coming from the West anymore.
correct. And I think you see Deadlock, which is way down. The Finals, if you remember, which is from Embark, is way, way down. Once Human is the only other one I'd point to, Eric, and that's another Chinese studio.
We'll talk about this in the state of gaming stuff, but it part of, I think, the Western gaming industry struggles right now is that the emerging markets are better at making games domestically.
I think the one last thing I'll say about Marvel Rivals is I think it goes back to one of the core HD design concepts, which is horizontal versus vertical progression. And one of the things I think is also a factor here is just absolute content pace, just the supply side factor. And so when I think about the fact that Marvel Rivals can have content drop every 6 weeks, it's one way to think about you're trying to build as many retentive units as possible. And retentive units is like a piece of content, and then how often the content drops, and then what the retentive effect of that content is. It's the expected value of those things. And Marvel Rivals has opted for quantity, I would argue, over quality. Each Overwatch character has X number of hours of mastery is inherent in the design to reach satisfaction. We can come up with a more specific model. Mastering Road Hook is hundreds of thousands of hours of gameplay in Overwatch based on the way it's tuned and the way it aims, all those things. And Marvel Rivals, I don't think has any of that Blizzard polish, but they do have is pace. And this is how China wins, I think.
Do you think this is purely live service working at its most efficient, where the new content is what brings people in the door? You don't think there's anything inherent about the design that's keeping people around?
No, I think that they didn't fuck up. They didn't fuck up a lot. I think they win here on content and IP. I don't think they took a lot of risks with that. All the characters do what you want them to do. There's some nice things like their team ups, where, for instance, if you have Rocket and Groot on the same team, there are bonuses you get. So I think what they did really successfully in this design is they met expectations. This is what you'd expect.
I've heard a lot of praise for the character design as being very sharp. All the characters feel overpowered in their own way. And a lot of competitive games designs actually turn into mush because they don't allow things to be overpowered.
I think that's fair. I also would argue that's the most shocking thing. I think coming from like a normal shooter to hero shooter to this is that the TTK, or the time to kill each character, is really high. Everyone has like a copious amount of health. There's a lot of healing. It feels much closer. It's even, everyone's squishier than in a traditional MOBA like Dota. I think that's one of the things, is there's not as much power scaling. Like you might call a hero shooter versus a MOBA. There's no in-round progression beyond the ultimate. So everyone's pretty squishy throughout the match, which I think is a miss, in my opinion. I wish they actually went a little more MOBA-y.
So the game is slower.
It's
Saying
a lot of
slower
button
than
mashing. It's a lot of button mashing
competitors.
of just hitting the same button over and over again. Of someone applies armor and healing.
That's interesting. I would assume that more death, more like, or a lower TK would be good for retention. You get more kills, there's more action, more excitement. I bet there's some sort of a bell shape there where it's like
it's always
you want
zero
just
sum,
enough.
though, right? I think if you apply the assumption that there's a bunch of kill inequality, that very few players are responsible for the most number of kills, then I actually think this turns that observation on its head, because there's just less deaths. So there's actually less inequality. There is proportionally, but it's not as punishing.
Yeah, like in absolute terms, maybe you even throw some psychology in there. You look at the numbers at the end of the match and you go, oh, I got 1 kill and this other guy got 8. That's not as bad as if you're playing Call of Duty. It's, oh, I got 2 kills and this guy got 54. It's like an insane difference.
What happened to Deadlock?
That's interesting.
I can't explain it. No,
The
this is
three game?
Valve shooter MOBA. Is it
It
still
went
alive? Is it
off a
did it
cliff
launch?
in terms of PSU. It has still been, they've still been releasing updates for it. They put a new
What's
test
PSU?
server here. Player simultaneous users, just the amount of people online at the same time. But if you look at SteamDB right now, Deadlock is, fuck, let's just pull it up. I should have been more
But
careful.
they didn't pull it back or like anything. They were just like, yep, this is the game.
Yeah, it's good
Deadlock
old.
developed. Oh, release date to be announced. Okay, so they're doing the, oh, we're still in beta thing.
Yeah, it's the Gmail thing.
There are no reviews.
They don't allow them
surprised
because
by
the
that.
product
Yeah.
will technically invite only.
Yeah, they know how to game their own Steam store system.
Yeah, I know. That's interesting that a Valve game has no
Just this
reviews.
I've been playing Pokemon Pocket TCG. I know it came out 3 months ago, but it's the only other major card game on mobile of, obviously, as a Marvel Snap, not Marvel Rivals developer. I'm looking at that. It is the best loot box opening experience I've played, and it is awful gameplay. Like, the gameplay is so repetitive and boring and stale, and I could ramble. I don't want to dig too much into it. Everyone knows the Pokemon card game as a kid. They all collected the cards and nobody knew the rules for how to play. It's a similar vibe.
But they
Um,
they simplify it, don't they? They do the thing that all TCGs are doing, where you basically don't have to worry about the colors of the mana or the energy.
That's right.
There's
Yeah. So the
there's
game is
autoplay.
simplified. It's streamlined for mobile. Yeah, there's right. You can just press a button and the game will just play cards for you, which is yet another sign that they're like, hey, actually the gameplay sucks. So maybe just let the little kids, like, just let them watch the cards and watch the animations. But they simplify the game. They made some nice adaptations to make it work better on mobile. Smaller decks, automatic energy drawing, a lot of the frustration. But what happens is all the cards do the same thing. There's a grass type Pokemon that you put 3 energy on it and it attacks for 100 damage. And then there's a fire type that you put 3 energy on it and it attacks for 102 damage. There's a lot of thematic reskinning of stuff, but like all the cards basically just do the same thing. You level up the card, it does what you put energy on it, you attack with it. I'm glossing over a lot here, but yeah, I after playing it, I'm like, oh, actually, Marble Snap is actually a pretty good game. But what I think is, have you guys played Pocket?
Oh yeah,
No, I'm
it's
trying
a
to
loot box
download it right
simulator.
now.
It's the most
trying to log
elaborate
in.
loot box simulator I've ever played.
Yeah.
It's really
Yeah, no, the pack opening experience feels amazing. And I felt compelled to log in and open packs even after I stopped playing the battling.
But everything around Meta Collection is so beautifully done. Like, you have an album where you put all your cards. They're ordered from the orders of the Pokemon that they're in. There are holographic versions which have new animations behind them, like those gifts from Harry Potter, which are really cool. And not only that, I think the other thing they do, which is really cool, is when you have this exchange system. I don't know, Eric, you could talk about it. They have this trade system and you can get cards in other languages, which is really cool too. Like, you can check German and Japanese. Like, it feels like a true game for collectors.
Yeah, they definitely took a lot of the ideas from physical card game collection and like put it in here. And part of me wonders if this only worked because paper Pokemon TCG was so popular that people are like, yeah, I'll take my cards and put them in a binder, right? Whereas if it's like hey, collect these cards for this game you've never heard of, these characters you've never heard of. Oh, you want to put them in a binder and show them to your friends? I don't know. I view it from the lens of a Snap developer. I'm like, hey, actually, a lot of this stuff is not stuff we can copy or replicate because, like, they're going off like a 2-3 decade old established paper nostalgia product.
So is there literal binder? Like you sort your cards, you put them in binders, and
Yeah, so
go
you
through
can
the
take a card
binders.
collection,
Is
you
that
can
the
put them
idea?
in a binder, you can feature a binder so your friends can look at your binder, and you can put like, oh, here's my page of all my shinies, or here's my page of all the EV evolutions.
Organization could be done in Marvel
Yeah,
Snap. I
but
don't know if it's like
I think
what
people
the value
care
add
about
there is.
arranging their collection and showing it to their friends with Pokemon in a way they don't care about for Marvel Snap or Hearthstone.
Snap
or...
does have meta collection
Yeah,
features. Like
that's
if you
fair.
collect certain collections of albums, they do have a reward track, which I found really nice. To our friends at
I completely ignore that feature. It's unclear how incremental it was.
So you said it's a loot box simulator. It doesn't sound like it has anything to do with the actual game. So have we found a new formula for free to play games? Just take out all that stupid gaming.
So I think this only works because of the popularity of paper Pokemon card games. I don't think people would be interested in opening loot boxes full of stuff that they have no prior emotional attachment to, or
I think that's also something you got to put in context, which is that the Pokemon TCG paper game in Japan does 1 billion alone. If you walk around Japan and you go into a lot of the otaku shops, when you look at things that are displayed in the card rack, it's almost always Pokemon cards. Then it's One Piece. Magic doesn't really get much of a showing, and then it's Yu-Gi-Oh! Somewhere in there too. And Pokemon is always like numero uno. And so you already have a built-in physical audience. They've been starved because the only other version before this was a goddamn fucking version where you basically had to register your physical cards and the digital cards. You couldn't even make a payment in the fucking game, which is very Nintendo, right? Yeah, this is why I think this thing is going to struggle in the long run. It's already done 370 million, just to be clear, but it's tearing it up, but it's mostly Japan.
How does the progression work? Do you win cards by winning games like in Marvel Snap, or is it like loot box? Can I just go and buy a card pack? What's the progression look like?
Sorry, what was the question?
What is progression?
How does set collection work? Do you get cards by winning games, or do you get cards by opening packs?
So
or
it's all pack
combination
driven,
of both,
right? Just like the paper game. You get these packs, and they're simplified. They only have 5 cards in them. Every day, every 12 hours, you get to open a pack, right? There's 3-4 booster pack versions you can pick from. You pick a pack, you open it. There's a beautiful animation where it rips open and the 5 cards go fly out and ba-ding, ba-ding, new card. Oh, this one's super shiny, right? Lots of
it's amazing.
The juice, right? It just feels great. It's just like
it's slotty.
ASMR. Yeah, so you open 2 packs every day. And for a lot of people actually who talk about the game, they're like, yeah, this itches my like gambling addiction of as a kid paying $3 to open a pack. No, I just do it on this mobile game for free. So I think a lot of people, just the pack opening experience is a huge part of the draw. You can earn these things faster. You can pay money to open them faster. And then there's like daily quests and shit like that. But for the most part, it's just you wait, open packs, buy, open packs. Battling basically is super underemphasized. You don't get jack shit from battling. There's a bit of a single player quest line where it teaches you how to play and you earn more packs that way. But it gets capped out pretty quick. And for the PvP battling, there's basically ranking system. There's no progression system. There's no ladder rewards. There's no... Chris is showing us the shiny Mewtwo EX he just opened.
Yeah,
so good. Oh my God.
You're getting Chris showing his
Looks
phone on
amazing.
screen.
But yeah, you can tell from the game that they emphasize heavily the pack opening and collection, and they strongly de-emphasize the battling. I can't think of another game where there's no meta progression rewards, there's no like achievement rewards, no ranking system.
So there's literally no
Unless you
reason
wanna
to
battle.
battle.
No, there is missions you get. There are missions that give you current season rewards.
The single player, there are single player missions. There's no PvP missions. There's no like reason to do PvP unless you just want to do PvP.
How do you accelerate your pack opening?
You can do the single player missions, which again are finite and capped out, or you can spend money.
Damn, you literally just $3 for a pack.
It's more fucked up than that, Chris. What you do is you buy the accelerators on time. Remember we were talking about those 2 packs that Eric buys per day? You buy an accelerator on the time. So rather than buying a pack directly, you have to buy the time expiration. So they price everything in time, which is going to bite them in the ass. And the other thing that can happen is if you get their subscription, which they have a free trial for. Have you ever heard of someone with a fucking IEP free subscription is weird? Oh my God, I'm going to learn the experience of opening an additional pack and then I'll convert. But if you get onto their Battle Pass subscription, you get an additional pack open every 12 hours, I think, or 24 hours.
Well, why do you think pricing and
So these things are expensive.
Why do you think pricing and time is going to bite them in the ass?
I think it forces you to price everything in whatever that unit of time is. And that just feels way more annoying to me than doing something direct purchase. I guess I'm trying to think about, so if you want to raise time, I guess you would raise the expiration of the timer, which I think is a weird way to price things. Like they could come out with a premium pack. So right now they're going to go through different sets, right? And every 12 hours, I think the question is what's going to happen after those 12 hours expire? Can you always get the new pack or can you always get an old pack? And if you want to do price differentiation, if you want to make one pack more expensive than another, then you have to do that in time, right? You'd have to say, oh, you have to wait 18 hours rather than 12 hours. And I think there are a lot of consequences to how you think about your particular day of engagement session that are design baggage that you don't want. Whereas currency compresses time and space, which is why I think money is a store of value. And that I think is why it's such a compelling mechanic for economy designers. And I don't think this is the right tool to do all distribution, just free to play distribution.
It sounds like it's a way to, it's almost the, I don't know, combination of the hangover effect or something where you don't want somebody to do all of their spending right up front and then never come back. You let them do a little bit of their spending every single day so that the retention is longer and maybe their average spend per day is lower, but their retention is longer. So LTV increases. But I think it's interesting that they decided to go with a completely different system than what was already out there. Hearthstone and Magic the Gathering Arena already have, I don't want to say they've figured it out, but they've got pretty good systems.
Eric, you wrote a piece on TCG's Pocket's trading system, which launched this week. It also had record revenue, by the way, up to 6 million. There was a content drop, an expansion drop, so maybe that was it. But 6 million a day, up all-time highs. It was actually trending down to 1 million a day. Huge reversal of fortunes with trading and the expansion pack. So who knows what?
Has it actually reduced their revenue? I haven't looked at any stats.
Since trading came out?
Yeah.
Oh no, it's way fucking up. It's all-time highs.
Okay. Wow. Okay.
It's
so Pokemon trading. This is the I think interesting topic that's really interesting for us as like game economists. So most digital card games, Hearthstone, Magic Arena, etc., do not allow for trading, right? And they do this on purpose because trading devalues the cards you open. If you can open a bunch of card packs or loot boxes, give you a bunch of fluff. If you could just dump that fluff on the secondary market, all these common cards are a penny each, right? It like devalues them and makes you less excited to open packs, etc. Those secondary market sales undermine the primary sales that you get as the card printer, and so you don't want to allow for secondary market sales. So the trend in digital card games is to remove trading, and instead they'll have some kind of flexible card acquisition system where you can get cards, specific cards you want inefficiently, or you can get random cards very cheaply. So the way this usually works is random cards cheaply is you open packs with random cards, and maybe you can disenchant them or dust them or turn them into wild cards to get specific cards you want at a more expensive rate. So that's how most card games do it. I know there's a bunch of Web3 people who are like, oh, look, let's bring back trading. I think they're all wildly misguided. We'll see how it turns out. Maybe I'm wrong. So this brings us to Pokémon TCG Pocket, which, first off, TCG in its name, trading card game. Pokémon TCG Pocket promised trading when they launched as part of they're like, we're going to bring trading. We know that's core to the Pokemon card game experience and we want to deliver there. And I think this is interesting because, again, it's deviation from what other games are doing. And it makes sense for Pokemon because, like we mentioned earlier, so much of the value of this game is opening packs and collecting them rather than the battling itself. And a big part of what makes you excited to open a pack is also like the trade value of the cards. You're like, oh, like I got this shiny, my third shiny Mewtwo. Okay, I don't need another Mewtwo, but hey, this is considered valuable in the second, and maybe I'll trade it to my friend who really wants it. And so the ability to trade, or the perceived ability to trade, makes you more excited to open packs, makes you want this stuff more. However, this game is giving players free packs constantly, free cards constantly, right? As a digital card game, whereas a physical card game, you got to pay money for every card that they print and every booster pack you open. So they've got this inflation problem. You got all these free cards entering the system, and if you allow for trading, aren't they just going to crash the market? 3 months after launch, they launched this trading system, and it is a total shit show. They clearly knew this was a problem, all the risks I identified earlier, because they basically made it extremely inefficient to trade. They made extremely high trading fees. Basically, it's like an 80% fee. So if I want to send you $5 worth of cards, $4 gets burned and you get $1 worth of cards, is the way I would think about it, which is insanely high. And on top of that, there's like time restrictions, and there's restrictions on which cards can be traded. Like the newest pack, those cards are totally untradeable. It's only old cards that are tradable. And the highest rarity cards are also not tradable. So the most desirable cards are not tradable. And the community had a big backlash against this. And my theory is that they wanted to promise trading and have the perception that trading is available, but they don't actually want anyone to trade because it's really bad for both card game engagement and revenue. So they wanted to deliver the most gimped trading system possible, but still be able to claim that trading exists in the game, and wanted to quietly sweep it under the rug. They launched trading right before their newest card set, the Space Time Smackdown. It's like Pokemon Diamond and Pearl themed set, which Phil mentioned, a huge revenue spike. It's probably dominating the social media around Pokemon Pocket. And the whole trading fiasco was on fire for 2 days and then disappeared. And I think this was a strategic timing thing where they wanted to sweep that controversy under the rug. They claim they have delivered on trading and then just forget about the topic in the future.
So why did they feel like they had to do it? Because you can't trade cards in Arena, MTG Arena. Like, does Pokemon have to do it?
One is that just some marketer said they would do it, and then they were like, oh, fuck, we got to do it now. One is that it was intentional, that the promise of trading increases revenue in those first 3 months. Before they deliver trading, the promise that these cards will eventually be tradable increases purchase of those. You see this behavior in Web3 all the time. We promise a future feature and it increases present sales. Yeah. And third is that because collection is so core and because trading is part of what makes collecting interesting, they wanted to, that's like part of the core game for them is the trading.
It seems like it would be a pretty big improvement and not change things all that much if they were to just allow many-to-one trades or many-to-many relationships in trades. Because that's like the most crippling problem, is like one-to-one trades is just not efficient at all. And I get where they're coming from. Like, it sounds like they're trying to emulate good old-fashioned opening of packs and trading with your friends, the type of stuff that happened on the playground. So it makes sense that like you have to go and put through a trade offer to a specific person. I like it, like just purely from a nostalgic point of view.
Well, hold on. You have to burn 4 cards to send 1 card. If you want to trade your Charizard for my Mewtwo, you have to burn 4 Charizards to send your 5th Charizard to me. And I burn 4 Mewtwo's.
Oh, it has to be that card?
Or an equivalent
You
rarity card. You have to destroy 4 cards to send me 1 card. I have to destroy 4 cards to send you another card back.
Okay, that I missed. I thought it was, first of all, I thought it was just like any card, and I was like, okay, you'll just use like
equivalent
fodder.
Yeah.
But oh my God, it's fucking.
So I mean, that's gonna
like
push. So I don't know. Let's think about the economic consequences of that. So you're only gonna burn the cards that have the lowest value. So basically, every card basically got a price floor, which is it's a reserve price, which is it gets at least crafting material, right?
It's just 5x whatever the price would be, right? Because you're basically slashing all the quantities by 80%. It's pushing the price up 5x of whatever it would be.
The easier way to rationalize
in
it
an actual
is
market,
like a dust system, like Hearthstone has. Like you can destroy 4 legendaries, 5 legendaries to craft 1. Think of trading like that. You destroy 5 cards to craft 1 of the same tier, and it's mediated through this trading system. But assuming that you can find someone to trade with, yeah, it's just a 5-to-1 crafting system.
Yeah, but in the dusting system, the new card is being emitted out of nothing. This system, which requires
the total supply curve, they're like there's
it's a destruction of value. It's
not the same in the crafting system. 5 in,
it's
1 out.
not. No, in that system, you're getting rid of 5 cards and you're emitting 1 card. We could call that like a zero sum or neutral, assuming that those 5 cards were equal the value of the new card. So you've destroyed $10 worth of, and then you get dollars back.
It's 5 of the same tier.
In this,
you destroyed 5 legendaries to mint 1.
No, right now I'm just talking about like a dust system like Hearthstone. They also have this in Arena. The cards that you get, the packs that you get, those wild cards are like, they've never existed before. They didn't come from somewhere else. They're being produced, versus this the Pokemon system it's all closed. So the thing that you're burning 4 cards and just swapping, it's purely net negative. It's purely destruction. There's no production whatsoever.
Supply curve outward, these shift supply curve inward by at least 8 cards.
I would even argue the wild cards don't shift supply at all if we ignore rarity. If we just ignore rarity and we just talk about the total supply of cards.
Because it's every number of
right.
opens.
Okay.
You get
Total
a wild
supply of
card,
card.
right?
Yeah.
It's on top.
Ignore the magic system. I think the Hearthstone system is the better analogy.
I feel like it's interesting though, because it's a very new way to do things. Nobody's ever done that before. And what you're doing is, let's say I've got a collection of 10 cards, 40 cards. Every single time I want to trade a card, I burn 4 cards. So, 50 cards. So let's say I do 10 trades. I'm down to 10 cards in my collection because I burnt 40 cards in my collection. I burnt 90%. 80% of my collection. I'm choosing weird numbers. So has the other person on the other side of the trade, though. So instead of just 40 cards being destroyed, now cards have been destroyed. Whereas in the dusting system, only 40 cards would have been destroyed, and you would have just poofed the new cards out of existence. Like their emission system, and I'm using the word emission because it's like I'm a crypto person, but their emission system does not come from trade. Versus the dusting system is producing emissions.
Which I think is also important for their game economy. If they're giving people packs every 12 hours, they need some downward pressure on supply. And like this now becomes a sink for them. Like now
the only lever they have, though,
you're basically getting trading fuel, right? You're getting trading gas now every 12 hours is another way to think about it.
Yeah, that's definitely true. Early in the
And they
game's
can-
life, when they announced trading, a lot of people were like, "Oh, I set up like 10 farm accounts, just open free packs because when trading launches, I'll be loaded."
Can you trade someone nothing? So you really can't get around this trading within Rarity unless you do off-table stuff. Can you chat in Pokémon TCG Pocket?
There's no way to communicate. The trading UI basically is so bad that you have to coordinate trades off platform. There's no way to gift anybody anything, so you have to go through this burn.
But you
to
could
trade one.
You could still solve. So if you're a third-party platform, can you solve all these problems? You can basically get a bunch of trading fees, which is a bunch of burn cards you can keep in a central account, and then you can create a bunch of automated systems. And you could have a third party, for instance, trade between different rarities by arranging a series of trades. If you want to trust a third-party platform, they could figure out the trading logic.
Yeah,
Like you could build.
Yeah, it
they've
doesn't-
given you enough tools where you could build frictionless trade if you added enough third-party features to a platform. You could basically get around all the
Frictionless? No, because of the massive deflation
except
rate.
for that. But at least what they can do is they can turn that into raw fuel. Like they can commoditize that price, because basically what you could do with a third-party platform is you could basically send them cards, and they basically store another currency just on a third-party platform that's gas. They could literally call it gas,
Yeah,
but they get to a currency.
as the person trying to use the platform, it's always 5 in, 1 out. You can't get around that.
Correct. You can't get around that. So like part of what's going to be the case here is can they get, first of all, I'm going way down this third-party platform thing for no reason. But I don't know. The whole point of trade, I think, is you can basically get around any. It's so hard to control, right? Like you could build a third-party platform that does all this, right?
I don't think
You're never
that's
getting
so-
around a 5-1.
Yeah, and because these loot box openings are all IID, right? There's going to be someone who has a surplus of the card you want. So I don't think liquidity is actually a problem here, contrary to what my article said. But you don't need. What I'm trying to say is you don't need a third-party platform. I'm trying to say is you go on one of these message boards, you say, "I have this. I'm looking for this." Someone finds you.
That's fair. That there's a ton of friction in that system, and the reason that I mention that is I've been surprised that when I looked at downloads for TCG Pocket since the trading feature, I expected to see a lot in the Philippines and India, because now that there's trade, there should be a wage rate, right? I was like, okay, why are people? So I guess the wage rate right now, because it's so crippled, to your point, Eric, the wage rate is negative, mostly because of the burn, right? Is that one of the ways that Web3 can solve things? Like, why doesn't everyone Web3 just use a 4-card burn?
Because people would flip their shit.
We have rates like that in our game. They're not 80%, they're 6%, right? And they're marginal. They're incremental. We can do decimals. We can do 4.5%. What they've done is they've introduced a tax system, transaction fee that can only go up in these massive percentage increments, right? If you do a 1-for-1 burn, that's a 50%. You can't go lower than a 50% in the current system, which is insane to think that you can't go lower than a 50% tax rate on transactions, which is a massive. You can't satisfy like Coase's theorem in this environment because transaction costs are percent of the volume. So I think I definitely am in the camp that you pointed out earlier, Eric. Like this was not meant to be an actual feature. They wouldn't have integrated it. I refuse to believe that they would have integrated a taxation system like this if they planned on like growing the feature into the future. They could replace the card burn with some sort of a currency, like you burn cards in order to get the currency, and then every single rarity has a different currency. If you want to trade a legendary card, you have to burn 50 dust, and it takes, who knows, maybe it takes 10. Every card has a dust rating. So they could smooth it out that way, but like they haven't set themselves up to be able to use any sort of monetary tools in this environment.
The other kind of cherry on top is the UX is so bad. I won't get too much into it, but it's basically impossible to find a trade unless you are communicating off platform. If you have the game, I recommend try to even just get any trade done. It doesn't even matter a trade that you want. Just try to get any trade done, and you're going to find it impossible unless you're talking elsewhere.
Is it like you go to the person's profile, you click on them, click trade or submit trade, and then you...
Okay, so first off, you can
or
only
is there
contact
actual
friends.
marketplace?
There's no messaging. right? You can't say, oh, I want Charizard. You can send one trade request at a time, and in your trade request, you offer a card. You don't request a card, you offer a card. So let's say, Chris, you've got extra Charizards and you're looking for Mewtwo. You go here and you say, find Billy Bob 69, and you say, Billy Bob 69, would you like a Charizard? Billy Bob 69 sees your request, probably will just ignore it, but if he does respond to it, he picks a card to offer you. And so he'll say, oh, hey, you want a Pikachu? And you're like, no, I didn't want a fucking Pikachu, I want a Charizard, or I want a Mewtwo, right? You have no way to communicate what you want from him, right?
They're you off platform. How could you imagine this even without it? We're just going to offer fucking random trades for people?
And then on top of that, you can only have one offer at a time. So you can't even go down your friend list of 30 people and be like, hey, everybody, like, do you want a Charizard? Do you want a Charizard? Do you want a Charizard? You can only have one active thing at a time. So like, you send it to Billy Bob and you gotta wait. And at some point you say, okay, actually Billy Bob's not there. Let me try Charlie. And you send it to someone else. So yeah, it's awful. Yeah.
I would argue the transaction cost is closer to 95% even after for that.
If you think like the way you should have done it is request a card, right? You say, hey, I want Mewtwo. Like, who's got a Mewtwo, right? Give me your best out. Yeah. But yeah, the coincidence of once.
No, we know how to solve this, right? It's buy and sell orders, right? Just put a page up, card, and
like,
just
this
put,
is
like,
what I have, and this is what I'm willing to. This is what I'm willing to offer. This is what I'm willing to buy.
bid ask spreads.
Yeah.
Like you could like we really figured this out. I would say in digital economies, like this is one thing. Even we've solved this problem. I'm just surprised they couldn't implement it. It's not that technically hard to do bids and asks.
I clearly don't think they were trying to solve this
that's
problem.
true.
I think they were trying to cause a problem. There were 1,000 ways. Board Game Geek is like a place where you can trade board games, and it's pretty archaic. It's still 10 times better than this, and it was invented like 20
This is part
years
of my
ago,
shtick
so.
about it's intentionally bad.
Yeah, that sucks. That's too bad. I don't think I will play it. I don't know why I downloaded it
It's
after
good
this
to learn about
conversation. I
Max,
don't.
It feels great.
Yeah,
I play
yeah,
TCG.
it feels good just to understand what an amazing loot box simulator is and like how far they can take that simple mechanic.
It's really taken me a long time to actually get into
Sign
the
up for the
game.
free trial of the subscription and
Error.
then forget to unsubscribe.
Holy crap.
So we are now going to talk about Mathew Ball's impressive slide deck, 227 slides, I believe. We have gone down and edited them into some key highlights. And the first thing I want to start with, and I think it's the most important thing out of his deck, is really talking about the trends in the video game industry when we do what? We adjust for real prices. That is one of the things that has gotten lost in almost all these like economic reports is nominal versus real. And so the first graph he starts with in slide number 3 is looking at nominal prices, which makes it look like we've been on an absolute freaking tear in terms of growth rates. We're up 150% overall from 80 billion all the way to 200 billion in the last 20 years. That's 2011 to 2021. Really good. But again, this is all nominal. And again, this is everything. This is arcade, console, PC, mobile, VR, web. It does not include Web3 NFTs and does not include even hardware and accessories. But it looks like we're crushing it, right? But to his credit, in slide number 4, he gets us to looking at our real spend increases. So from 2011 to 2021, remember we were just talking about this crazy percent increase. I think it was 150%. But when you do it on a real basis, it's only up about 100%. And when he does is he compares that to the US GDP, which is up 52% over the same period, Japan, which is down 20%, and then real world GDP, which is only up 32% over the same period. I actually don't think this is a good comparison he puts together, because the thing that's not listed here, I would argue, is the comparable tech sector. The entertainment sector, the S&P 500, we'll cover that a little bit later. But I do want to give him credit for doing some real growth adjustments. But again, whenever you look at numbers, you have to look at them in context. And the next thing that he has is the forecasts that everyone has put together. And Eric, you have a chart going over that. You make this point way better. But he does have a couple other industries. He has book revenues, recorded music revenues, and spend on digital video. And while he doesn't have it going all the way back to 2011, so we can't do a like-for-like comparison, to be honest with you, what he's showing us right here is that they've been on a comparable growth streak, I would say, post-COVID? It looks like they've been growing while we've been declining. So I think that was another interesting piece of contextualization. The only other thing that I really wanted to talk about is like timeshare. Like I would argue this is crucial to video games growth, is whether or not we can grow new cohorts in terms of engagement. And what I mean by that, if we can get kids generation over generation to play more games than they normally have, and you just let time take its place, then you're going to stack more engaged cohorts and overall industry is going to increase. And it's been very hard to get good data on this. I tried to look into the American Time Use Survey, which is a really consistent time series where they take Americans who keep logs of what they're doing and coders will go categorize them into different categories. That has not shown a lot of increases, and it has a lot of contradictory data that doesn't seem to make sense. And so he pulls from gamer segmentation surveys and an evolution of entertainment surveys. And what he shows is that there's 70% of Americans play games, however they're defining that, which I think is pretty incredible. He
Sounds
does.
high.
That sounds really high. I like clearly must be survey based.
Between these two, I guess between the two survey sources is pretty close, but
The weekly playtime among US gamers looks like it's been pretty stable at around 15 hours per week, which is actually less than I thought. That clocks in at what, 2 hours per day? A little bit under.
that's a lot, dude.
I don't know. I
How much
almost
do you
feel
play
like
a day?
that's- I guess this is average.
2 hours is.
I mean,
I
when you
consider
think of-
myself pretty
pretty high.
hardcore, and I play like maybe 2 hours a day. Yeah.
I think mobile is difficult for me, and I also have a lot of quick sessions on mobile.
These are all surveys too, so like they probably it's self.
That's garbage. Monthly spend. Let's not even talk about that.
Is the reason we're so obsessed with playtime because more playtime?
Yeah, engagement is roughly proportional to hours spent, or sorry, revenue is roughly proportional to time spent gaming.
To time spent, and that's like partially because of the way we monetize, right? Like we gone into this world of microtransactions where if you're not playing, you're not spending.
Oh, yeah, even in a
Versus,
box bar, let's say a box game is
I don't know,
10 hours. Then if you play for 10 more hours, you buy one more game. I know it's a simplification.
Maybe
but-
No, I know. I was just thinking about like I feel like I know obviously Legos is not the same as video gaming, but like your hour spent per dollar of Legos is probably super dollars per hour is super high for Legos versus super low for video games. And I wonder if it doesn't have to do with our inability to discriminate on box prices. Like why is it that it's much easier to internalize why a Lego box is one set's more expensive than another because it costs more to produce?
I see. Why is the entertainment value per dollar for video games so high?
I was thinking that the dollars per hour of entertainment value is actually really low in the video games industry, and I'm trying to figure out why.
My explanation is that video games are software. Software has extremely high fixed costs and low marginal cost. And so you make a great game, every marginal copy of it is super cheap. So like that's why they're able to produce so much entertainment at such scale. And that the reason it's getting cheaper is that because the gaming industry is getting bigger, the gaming audience is getting bigger, that fixed costs, marginal cost then keeps reducing the dollars per hour further and further.
You're thinking of this as a punishment, Chris? Is that why isn't P higher given how big Q is? And I would argue the thing that's unique about games is that they can make Q so big, is that we can make quantity played so big because we have such repeatability of content. So you can play Call of Duty for 10,000 hours. No one is going to watch, maybe Star Wars is an exception, but very few people buy a DVD for $20 and then spend 10,000 hours watching it again. And so what does that mean? That means for us, Q goes to really high. And I would argue like the whole point of monetization as a monetization designer is to correlate marginal costs with marginal benefit in terms of monetization systems. Like which one can most correlate the increase in engagement that games have with the revenue that we're able to generate? That has been the game, I would argue, in the last 20 years in monetization design is to figure that out. Remember the quarter, the arcade? The arcade's the most basic implementation of this, right? Because it's basically every minute or every 30 seconds, whatever the average playtime is, you have to insert another quarter. And so your marginal cost curve is always going to be correlated with your marginal benefit curve to some degree. And I would argue we've just evolved that system.
Yeah, I guess my main criticism is my main question is why are we not able to change price? Like why are we...
Price is going down.
I think he gets that.
Like the price is going down. Like Netflix, you can see Netflix was able to increase not just nominal prices, but real prices.
So all right, here's my explanation for this. Movie ticket price, it's physical. You're like the marginal cost is actually pretty fixed. Can't really bring it down. Same for concert tickets, although it is actually going up. Netflix, I think it was cheap here because of startup subsidies and they were actually losing money. So I think this price increase is actually them just trying to make money.
With how you think about their ad skew and bouncing people between the paid and the ad-supported ARPU and globally. There's a lot that's going on in these numbers. He has one for games, if you go to slide 24, where he brings in a catalog for Toys R Us, 1992, and he takes the prices that are in there and he inflation adjusts them. And even if you just look at them nominally in 1992, you're looking at $60 to $70 a game. And
oh yeah, it's insane, man. It's
I didn't know they sold Super Nintendo.
Would
games
never
for
pay that
$70.
now.
Game prices have always been historically high. They've gotten progressively cheaper, which I actually think is another technology story of technology just actually gets cheaper. But remember, we also have DLC. We have deluxe editions. Like, we figured out how to price discriminate. Like, this is the profit maximization strategy.
Yeah, it's just so interesting. We're just not able to. And there's a strong gamer culture as well, and we talk about the Reddit gamer all the time on this show. If you were to talk about raising the cost of a game to $100, where it was in the 90s, you would have your head on a spike. And so I think it's really interesting. One of the growth factors he identifies at the end of the show is, what is the price of GTA 6 going to, or GTA 6 going to be? Are they going to come out at 100? Imagine having that level of power with your game, where it's just one of those circle guys. It doesn't really just click that. You can see.
Yeah, I thought this was weird. They're like
GTA 6 pricing.
Anyway, finish it then.
Like one game is a part of the growth engines for the industry, which I think is really interesting. Imagine being those game economists. You have the power to move the entire market. Will you increase the baseline price of all games? And maybe it's the Big Five's responsibility to be the price setters. Maybe it's their responsibility to say, hey, as the monopoly, or as the people who have 70% coverage over the entire the gaming space, it's our responsibility to raise prices.
So, to summarize, the argument in the slide deck is that GTA 6 is going to be such a popular game that whatever price they set will be seen as standard.
Yeah, exactly. So it gives
Which
everybody the ability
bizarre. This one game has that much. First off, there's a bunch of games that are already at $70. There's a bunch of games that are bucking the trend. I don't know. It just seems.
So has the price been finalized for GTA 6? That's what I think that he's saying is, if they decide to go for the $100 price tag, what does that do? Think about, what is that? 33% of the value of the new console? I don't know. That's not insane.
So let's say we assume that GTA 6 does actually have this market pricing power that he describes. What does that say about the state of competition in games? That pricing is dictated by the industry leaders.
Yeah, it's interesting because we're not creating necessarily substitute products. It's interesting because if your competitor increases their price, you can also increase. I guess is that what the pricing behavior in an oligopoly looks like?
I'm not sure. I think it depends on the model of competition.
Basically, what this means to me is that there's a demand story that's not really being told, and it's that demand is much higher, and the equilibrium price could be much higher, and the gaming industry is just not really. There's not enough price discovery there. I don't know. It makes no sense that with the increased competition, the price would go up, right? If you think about the pure supply side of the story. Yeah. I just don't think that we've discovered the correct price. And I think that those massive players have the ability to discover prices. I think there's a lot more risk if you're a small player, if you're a small developer who doesn't have a huge market. You release your game and nobody's going to buy it. They're going to say, absolutely not. I'm not spending $100 on Dragon Age. But maybe I'll spend $100 on GTA 6. And then after GTA 6 is set the price.
Shocked me. Basically, they said since the introduction of online subscription services like Xbox Live or DLC, Battle Pass, monetization stuff, that PC and console revenues are basically not that dramatically different. To Philip's point, right, maybe the microtransactions are just keeping pace with the box price decline. As box prices go down, microtransactions are just keeping it level.
That's interesting. Yeah, do they have an overall average revenue per game? I don't know. Or average price? Yeah. And how do you define a price? What's the price of playing Brawl Stars versus Call of Duty?
Just to follow up on the S&P 500, I don't want to say I'm critical of, but he plays fast and loose when he starts a lot of the time series data. And so sometimes it's 2011, other times it's 2021. Other times it's 2018. And the reason it's really important is because those timeframes matter a lot, because COVID changes everything, right? Because COVID is a downward slope for us because it was all-time highs. It was a one-time, all-time spike. And we've been descending downwards, and now we bottomed out, we're back up. So when you look at things from relative cliffs, you have to be really aware. So to give you an example, he makes the point that gaming is up when we compare it to real GDP from 2011 to 2022 or 2021. But when you look at it when he compares it to the S&P 500, the S&P 500 is up 57% since 2020. EA, Nintendo, Take-Two, Roblox, Krafton, Next, all these studios are below where they were in 2021. They're actually negative rather than S&P being up 57%. But again, you're making this comparison from 21. So I wish when we go back and we look at some of these comparisons, he's a little bit more consistent. I would have loved to see how games did in terms of real terms to 2021. Compared to the S&P 500 rather than GDP. I think GDP is the lowest possible number that you can choose for a tech sector to compare against.
Some of those didn't exist before 2021. I think 2021 was Roblox's first year in trading.
That's totally fair. So we could even look market cap of all these companies combined, real market cap.
Yeah, I think it's weird to look at all of them individually and then compare them to the most significant index fund in the entire world. It seems like we should have combined all, make a gaming index and then the S&P 500.
Yeah, I knew Unity got slaughtered. I didn't know Ubisoft got slaughtered. Minus 80%.
Oh, Ubisoft is in the fucking shitter, dude.
What
Those
happened?
brothers are running for the hills right now. Costs are way. They are.
What have they put
The problem
out?
is they've got so many fucking distractions. For instance, they put out this Roller Champions game. They got this Mario versus Rabbids game. They've been fucking around in transmedia with Assassin's Creed. They haven't put out Splinter Cell.
They also went for Web3.
Mobile's been a disaster. Their headcount is way too high. It's almost double the size of EA with not even double the revenue. Eric, I think you picked up on this too, is again, going back to the timeshare. If we think about the Reed Hastings quote that Netflix's biggest competition is Fortnite, I think the other biggest competition is social media, right? It's not just Netflix, it's also social media. And one of the graphs he has in here is the daily hours of use among all US adults for TikTok, Instagram, YouTube, and Facebook. And unfortunately, like I would have loved to see where gaming tacked up here. I think that's like the missing piece. And if we go one slide down, he does have mobile gaming share of digital media time among US adults. So I think we can include this in the same bucket. And that's showing decline since 2020. Again, COVID, when he starts these graphs, like I think can really throw you for a spin, but it goes from 50% of digital share time all the way down to about 13%. Like we're not growing anymore. But again, this is mobile gaming. Like why is this the denominator? Why can't we include PC and console here? Like I want a more complete picture of gaming in people's lives.
I think
And this
the
doesn't
argument
include
he's trying to
China.
make, the argument he's trying to make, which is, again, he's cherry picking grass to fit the argument, but is that social video, stuff like TikTok, and this is more engaging than traditional social media. It's much more high stimulation, much more like attention grabbing. And that this TikTok, YouTube Shorts, Instagram Reels is competing with mobile games in a way that Twitter or Facebook did not.
Yeah, they are very different products though.
I think they fill the same niche in terms of where you slot them into your entertainment time.
I definitely think this is our competition.
They're on mobile. They require high focus, so you can't really watch TikTok and I don't know, listen to. They fill a specific engagement level, stimulation level. I think just because of the supply side looks very different doesn't mean the demand side is necessarily different. The story I always use is like a banana and a smoothie. They like fill very similar nutritional needs, functional needs, right? I need something I can hold in my hand and drink and consume and gives me calories. But banana producers and smoothie makers are like very.
The other thing that really worries me is that Ben Thompson on the Trajectory podcast mentioned that Facebook is testing and Instagram are testing AI content and feeds, and that it's absolutely slaying right now in terms of engagement. And if this is what the competition is going to be like, we need to level up.
AI generated videos and stuff.
Where is the creative use of AI in gaming? Like we used to be the forefront of all these technology revolutions, haptic feedback, fucking even AI we subsidize, right? With
GPUs,
NVIDIA
yeah.
chips. But like, where are we at the forefront of AI besides making Nintendogs with the fucking AI chatbot?
Thus far, my biggest or like bull case for AI in video gaming is just to reduce costs. I don't think it's improving the product. I don't think we're creating like AI generated video game experiences. I think we're probably using AI in the production of games, which hopefully will lower the cost. One thing that I can't get out off the back of my mind is like, these are just not the same things. And I'm not sure we should be focused on, is the end goal to just create like this hyper quick, hyper attractive, instantaneous satisfaction, super fire hose full of experiences that makes me glued to my phone? And is there a way for us to grow and compete by creating good experiences? Or is this our end game? This is the direction we have to go if we want to be able to compete with TikTok and Instagram.
My concern is that these platforms are not omnidirectional media. I always thought we could dominate omnidirectional media like video, Netflix. I think in the long run, interactive entertainment is just far more engrossing. And not only that, we can customize it even if people don't want, say, cognitively draining. I would separate those two things. Like, for instance, point and click adventure games. There's low levels of activity we can use, but people like interactive entertainment. They like back and forth between the system and themselves. And omnidirectional media like video can't offer that. YouTube, I don't think, can't even offer that to some degree. But TikTok, Instagram, Facebook, like these are platforms where the you interact with the machine and the machine interacts back with you. It's not you consuming content.
Yeah.
There's an active participation on all of these platforms. And that means it threatens us. I think it
if
threatens
we're-
us as being compelling. It has a higher compelling ceiling, I guess, is one way we could put it.
The good news is that like the function is, we know exactly why they're able to do what they're doing. UGC. There's no question about why are they able to scale like this? What's the secret sauce about why TikTok and Instagram Reels are so compelling for users on a phone? It's obviously like microscopic consumption. Just, okay, I'm consuming this small, tiny little thing and it's tons of variety, but you can't get that without UGC. The problem is that video game UGC is much more difficult to produce, and B, it's multimedia. It's not something it's not like a movie. You have to be able to interact with it. You have to be able to touch it. It's more a physical good. We're in this awkward place where we're not quite Lego, where we're not able to just basically say, fuck you, this Lego set, this Rivendell Lego set that I really want, it's $500. But we're also not in a situation where we are static media that is all the exact same type of content. It's just a different picture. And I think that there's definitely something to be said for UGC. I think there's something to be said for small gaming experiences that can be experienced in these, like, in this fire hose way. But at the same time, and this is my inner Redditor coming out, I don't want us to lose track of what it means to be a video game and what it means to produce stuff that people want to engage in for hours. I don't see Instagram and a traditional video game experience as similar products. They are substitutes in terms of the time that I'm spent. I only have so much time in the day, and I'm going to substitute my time for video games with my time for Instagram. But they're not substitutes in as far as.
Wait, isn't substituting time a definitional substitute?
No, it's the definite. Well, yes, and that's substitution is you spend your money on one thing and
Or time. Right?
you spend your money on one thing that you would have spent on something else. Yeah, or time.
If I improve the quality or reduce the price
I don't
of
know.
TikTok,
I don't.
you substitute away your mobile gaming towards TikTok.
I've tried to articulate this on the cast before, and I didn't do a good job. I still can't do a good job. I just don't think that we're TikTok, and I don't think that we should try to become more like TikTok, but more of a philosophical.
I agree with that too, but it does that. TikTok is still our competitor. It's still opportunity cost. It's still a substitute.
Okay, so we're not trying to become more like TikTok, but we are trying to figure out how to get our time back.
There's basically two things that matter in the competition for entertainment, because entertainment is time intensive, right? Like, it's ultimately correlated with how much time you spend on something. It's how much money you spend. And again, I still think there's that monetization level we were talking about, which is interesting. Here, as an entertainment product, the only way you're going to win is either you take market share from other people, which I think is actually a zero-sum argument, or what happens is that the more labor-saving devices are invented, and we have more free time, and that basically is an increase in the PPF, so to speak, of entertainment, right? Like I can play Fortnite and Magic the Gathering Arena, like your entertainment possibilities frontier moves outward, so to speak. And that has happened, by the way, historically. Yeah. But I would say that's how I see this. I actually do see this as zero sum because those things are so correlated.
Here's a question for you guys. How true do you think this causal factor is? Because I believe this story anecdotally, but the way Matt Ball proves it here is he just says, oh, TikTok time go up, mobile game time go down. He just overlays two time series and says, oh, and therefore it's causal.
It's causal?
How much do you believe the causality of this?
Well,
is there stronger proof out there?
It's not even, it's mechanical, right? Like, assuming ceteris paribus, that is true.
I would say the thing I don't see here, Eric, is first of all, they're different metrics. So he isn't literally laying them over, although I think that is something that's implicitly implied here. But we know what happened to social media during COVID. Did it have a similar spike? It looks like it didn't among his daily hours of use among all his adults. It looks like it's been on a pretty linear trend. Yeah, but I guess it was an increased growth rate. But it accelerates outward, and we didn't accelerate outward from COVID. We dipped. And I think that, to me, is the concern I have, is why did they accelerate and why did we dip? I don't get that yet. I think that's highly concerning to me. TikTok, all these people started game platforms too, so it's okay, what share of these platforms are people spending on games? Like, people are still spending a little bit of time on Facebook games. This worries me. Like, why are these things becoming increasingly more compelling and we're becoming less compelling?
Yeah, maybe it's the tech, like you said. The video, the UGC, the editing, the algorithm.
What I want to see, though, is I want to see this broken out by time cohorts. I want to see this broken out by an individual age group over time, and whether or not they're spending more time on social media or whether or not we're winning in the like, is Roblox.
Are you saying you disbelieve this thesis without that breakout?
I would say that I don't agree in the causal factor that this is driven by more social media means less of us. I don't think we're losing at the margin like that. I want to see whether or not young people are spending more time on social media or are spending more time on gaming over time, like for a given age group, let's say 10 to 19. I don't think we've lost that yet.
You can study that.
I want to see this broken out by age group and see who is being gained to social media in terms of age group and who are we losing in terms of age group. I think that's going to tell us a lot. And if we're losing young people, that's when I would really fucking worry. If we're starting to lose hours of engagement over time to social media for younger cohorts, I think that signals really bad fucking stuff for us as an industry.
So one noteworthy thing is that he talks about it here, but basically like foreign emerging markets, so to speak, are starting to make their own games and they're starting to be good. Basically, China's making games. They're pretty good. Marvel Rivals is pretty good. Black Myth Wukong was pretty good. And they're actually starting to crowd out Western developers, it seems like. You can look here, Western developers, this dark green used to be half of China roughly, and now it's like maybe 10%, 20%, 25%. Anyway, point is other countries are getting better at making games, and part of why we in the West feel a decline is because we're getting crowded out and not necessarily that gaming as a whole. Metaverse itself, at least he like cops to it. So this chart, each of these upward lines is a projection of how fast VR will grow. And basically every year, for starting in 2016, they were like, oh, it's going to double next year. All right, we're producing 10 million units. It'll be 20 million next year. Next year, the volume goes down. They're like, it was down this year, but I swear it'll double next year. Next year, it goes down. Like, oh, no, okay. But anytime now, it's going to start doubling. And you can see like gradually they finally reduced how optimistic their forecasts are. They're still upward sloping, which seems wrong to me. But yeah, anyway, VR totally flopped. Mr. Metaverse himself, I'm glad he recognizes it. I thought his whole Metaverse thesis was fucking, I don't want to drag his name. It's easy to punch up, but
DBO chart that has always floated around econ, or like the one where they telegraph out interest rates and they're perpetually wrong every single time. It's this graph in spades.
Yeah, I remember that one. I feel like VR suffers. The reason that video gaming is more difficult to serve to people is the same reason that board games are difficult to serve to people. It's because there's a little bit more cost associated with engaging with them. You've got to sit down, you got to learn the rules, you've got to really commit your time. VR is that on steroids. It's like you've got to fucking put a machine on your head. You've got to engage in this like digital space. It's the opposite of what we need right now.
Ball fundamentally misunderstands video games because he paints a big part of the metaverse as having a three-dimensional avatar, which feels totally cosmetic and not actually the important part of feeling immersed in an engaging activity where you have an identity and a persona that you're embodying. Like none of that is the specific graphics technology that's being used. Anyway,
I concur with Yorick.
So what do you guys think are our routes to recovering from this? He's got a bunch of points at the end.
I really don't agree with him on, except for maybe like,
you don't agree with the
no,
Switch?
the thesis is really lame. The only people who care about Switch is Nintendo because all platform sales are basically Nintendo. His numbers are actually wrong here. I think he has 60% of Nintendo spend as first-party sales, first-party games. The numbers I've seen are way higher than this, 70, 80%. So I don't think, first of all, not only that, like new consoles is always, it's what keeps the machine churning. That isn't an increased growth rate. That's normal.
Yeah, how would Switch 2 be a growth engine? I
Yeah,
understand.
it's ridiculous.
I will say he does caveat that all these growth engines, I don't necessarily believe in these. So he's covering his ass a little bit.
No, I think that's the case. Handhold devices, that's a joke. The handhold is not shipping any units. I think there's a lot of fluff. I think it really goes back to cohort stacking, I think is really important for us. If we really do continue to increase our capture of younger players via Roblox, and ultimately we can transform them to higher spend customers over time, those are just going to stack. To be honest with you, I think the only other thing I see is real here is AI, is that I think it can do massive things. People keep talking about supply side. Again, I think there's a lot on the demand side and how we integrate AI and game design that hasn't been explored yet. And I think there's a lot that hasn't worked. I think UGC hasn't panned out. That's been pretty much a disaster. I wouldn't say disaster, but it hasn't really worked the way people... Roblox...
I mean...
Except for Roblox. But a lot of like the platform level UGC, like in Stumble Guys or Fall Guys or Halo or Battlefield, like all that stuff has not really worked.
It's interesting. I wonder why it doesn't work. Do people just not care about like a skirt that was made by their friend?
You haven't heard anything about Dota either.
No, I don't.
Dota was supposed to be the mod platform. Auto chess came out of it. When's the last time you heard something like that?
Yeah. I need to look at that list again and see if I believe in any of those.
You're so
growth
Roblox
engines.
filled. Time you've shilled Roblox today.
No.
I mean, I heard that piece about like how I think
maybe.
UGC has basically just been absorbed by like indie game dev. That like the game dev tools are so much easier that where all these great indie games like Animal Well and Balatro and Celeste are coming out of is what would have been modders 30 years ago.
App Store regulation.
I think like when you're relying on App Store regulation or you're relying on the government for growth, you're pretty much fucked.
It's also like this. It's very much a capped amount.
Yeah.
It's cool. We now get like an extra 10% on our margins.
The effect App Store tax is probably down to 20% at this point.
I feel like that's relying on like inflation to make your nominal numbers go up. Oh, our numbers will be bigger next year because of inflation.
Maybe we should be spending more money lobbying Lena Khan to fucking do something. She's out now, right? But that's what the gaming industry should have been doing.
I actually do think we don't lobby enough. I actually think this is a huge problem we have. Our saving grace is that we've kept loot box regulation, but I'm surprised we haven't done more.
What's advertising? What could be done in advertising?
In-game advertising as a revenue
Oh
stream.
God, this fucking shit again. Stop.
Is this a perennial thing? I'm out of the consultant. Like I'm sure you hear the business gossip. more
This
than I do.
this has been around forever. Burnout, if you remember Need for Speed, like they've all tried it like billboards in games. It never goes anywhere. The other thing he's mentioning here isn't just that though. He's also mentioning that like when you play ad-based games on mobile, like hyper casual used to talk about, it's almost all incestuous, right? It's ads for other hyper casual games. But there's always been this thesis that, oh, we can push you PCG products like on Amazon. We can push you like hair blow dryers or some shit. And that's never panned out either. There's advertising in Roblox. That's actually a huge part of Roblox's spend is actually brand advertising where no one actually spends on microtransactions. It's like Vans or Barbie or some movie.
Well, and their ads have click through. You can like click on the ad, go immediately to that experience.
You can go to their playground though. Yeah, their experience.
Yeah, the experience.
Sure. It's
Yeah.
not
I don't know what he's calling ad revenue here though, because if I'm a hyper casual publisher and I pay $5 million to another hyper casual publisher, that's $5 million in cost for me, $5 million in so it's not net gains. So I don't know what he calls ad revenue here.
That's fair. It's revenue, but it's also cost.
Do you guys think that 80% of the people who play video
No,
games,
definitely not.
even mobile?
I think they definitely don't call them.
That's what I'm
I
saying.
definitely don't think they do. And not only that, I got a young cohort of people.
I know, that's what I'm saying. Like even of the people that, I mean, like a lot of my friends, so like my friends here in Champaign, they consider themselves gamers, but they're playing like Halo. They're playing like games that are no longer monetized. They're playing games that are off servers, and they're not the majority. But I'm just like, no anecdotal evidence is a terrible thing. But man, I just look at everybody I know. I'm a tech person. I'm young. I hang out with other young people, and I just don't see it. I don't see the 80%. My mom builds puzzles. My wife plays Ori and the Blind Forest, which I already bought 6 years ago, and I don't even pay for Xbox Live anymore.
But
Spend money.
do you think you spend around $10 a month on games, each of you?
When my Xbox membership was live, probably that was $15 a month.
And you didn't buy any other video games.
Me, my wife, and my mom. I'm the only one accounting for any of that. So I don't know, $16 a month, let's say, in a good time period.
Okay. That's $8. That's not too far.
Yeah, but that's among gamers.
Oh wait, that's split among 3 of you, so that's actually average of like $1. Yeah, okay, never mind.
I don't think we're doing a good job. I don't think that video games have done a good job at explaining their value customer. For some reason, there's this idea that all video games should be free and have infinite replayability, and you should never have to spend any money. And I think that narrative, I don't know where it came from, but it's like hurting our industry because if you can't keep up with inflation, it's like a big fundamental problem. We can't even price our box price games with inflation. How do we grow when we can't even meet inflation?
Chris, you can hire a monetization consultant.
Yeah, like Philip from a Game Economist.
That's what I'm saying. I mean,
he knows how to make sure your games will get as much marginal value as you can that your players are getting.
This is what subscriptions are about. This is what MTX is about. This is what loot boxes are about. This is what we
Call
offer.
now while supplies last.
This special editions like this. We've been at this problem for our history. This is what defines us.
Why do I spend game and not really think about it? But when it comes to a video game, I think so much longer and harder. And I know I might be different than you guys, but like for me, or $40 on a meal. You go out to a restaurant, $40 is you get an appetizer and a cocktail. You spent $40 for 2 people. Why do I do that? But I can't spend $40 on a video game.
Money on video.
No, I know you do. I know, but I don't know. This is purely anecdotal though. I'm going to dig into that ATES data to see what the different cohorts are up to, Phil. I'll write a blog post on it.
All right. Okay, peace. All right.
Anyways.
Bye. Well, hold on,
All
let
right.
me-
Yeah.
We should teach this to our children. Economics is major.
Everyone has to major in economics. Number one, for personal survival. Economics is major.